Good evening, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I am standing in the front yard of my Portland, Oregon food forest in Zone 8B. Now, I actually was heading out for a run. I was not intending to be doing more yard work today, but as I was leaving, I noticed that my front yard flower border slash plum guild bed is looking a little bit rough. So I'm actually gonna pause and not go for my run and do a little cleanup there in my front garden bed. And I want to show you some of the things I'm thinking about in terms of garden design, in terms of functionality of this front bed of my garden here. So up here in my front yard bed, my goal is that since it's up against the road, and there may be car noise in this video, you can see this is my street, the goal is that this bed up here in the front serves as an ambassador for permaculture. It serves as a way to communicate to the neighborhood that permaculture is not only a resilient way of living, that we not only grow a lot of our own food, I have a lot of food growing plants up here in this front bed, but that it also can be beautiful. So if that's my goal, as of right now, here in the middle of August, I'm kind of failing at it. Now, a number of factors have come together to make this bed really struggle this year. Some years it's gorgeous. When we first moved into the house, there was obviously nothing up here except poorly laid down sod with an underlayment of plastic mesh, which I'm constantly still digging out of the garden 13 years later, and nothing else. And so the first thing I did was I put in a front yard bed here up against the street that was all dahlias and pumpkins, because I didn't know what else to do, and I know this would have a big impact right off the bat. And over the years, it's kind of changed and grown. You can see now I have some very large plum trees here, and basically this is a giant plum guild up in my front garden. I also seek to slowly add over the years, as my budget allows, more and more and more perennial cottage garden plants. Let's let this car pass by. So that not only can it be a functional bed where I grow lots and lots of food and medicinal plants, but I'm also having beautiful pollinator attractor plants that my neighbors will enjoy and the birds and the bees will also enjoy. Okay, so as you can see, this bed is in kind of rough shape. Now, just a few years ago, if we look straight at my house, this was half of my driveway. So here was obviously one half of this double wide driveway, and we removed that to improve drainage in the yard, fix the problem of water in our basement, and so I could add this whole big strip of more garden beds. So these beds are really new hugel beds, and they're really immature. That's why there's not like a lot of great plantings up here at the front. It's just that I'm slowly adding things. Hugel beds need a few years to get going, and these are doing fine. They're on track for where I want them to be. This bed next to it, however, is riding the struggle bus. So this is a early Laxton plum, one of my favorite plums. You should check out my video on them. But it has struggled the last 2 years with aphids, and it has struggled with some bacterial canker, which is pretty ubiquitous in the Pacific Northwest for stone fruit. Let this fan pass real quick. Now, with the massive heat waves we've had and the fact that this tree was already struggling, it actually has some branch dieback from the heat stress. And I'm going to be doing some radical pruning to this tree. But it does not look good right now up here at the front of the house. Similarly, these daylilies look like garbage. They were given to me years ago, and I put them up here when we had kind of cooler summers, and the last 4 or 5 summers, they have looked terrible like this all summer. Bloomed for a shorter period than they should have, and have looked like a crisped, sunburnt mess most of the summer. These have to go. I have plans for other things to put in here in the fall, but right now I'm just going to remove them because they look terrible. I will also be removing this Lucifer crocosmia, which is enormous. It was given to me as a gift, and I thought it was a variety that was half as high as this, and I thought it would just peek over the edge of the bed here and have a nice little cascade of bright red flowers. It's huge, so it obstructs the pathway here and makes it hard to get under the grape arbor, and it's out of proportion for the bed, so I will be removing that. Speaking of out of proportion, the grapevines here are going to need a good trim. They're out of control. And at the same time, these water sprouts on my plum. You would not believe I just pruned this recently, but it sends up water sprouts in that hot sunny weather all the time. This is a prune plum that will not be ready until September. This tree also always has some issues, but sets huge amounts of fruit. It is the keystone species here for this guild. It is the anchor for this guild. And right now you can see it is so laden with plums. Branches are bent very low, but normally it should be a little bit higher. It's just super loaded this year with plums, as every year. Again, I'm going to be removing more daylilies. I will be removing this root sucker here. That is an issue if you grow stone fruit, particularly plums. They will sucker. You need to remove those at the base, sometimes 3 or 4 times a year. Then we're also going to do some basic maintenance here, cutting back lavender, removing volunteer borage that I don't want. And some of the flowers that are kind of spent, I'll be cutting those back to see if they get a second round. Now, obviously my rudbeckia is in full bloom, absolutely loving life, and the pollinators are loving it. So it will keep going for a long period of time and provides a lot of visual interest all the way into the fall, as does this origeron. Origeron is a native here, by the way, this kind of origeron. And here I have a flower carpet rose that I hate. I purchased 2 flower carpet roses at the beginning of the pandemic from a catalog, and neither of them are the correct color. So don't buy from a big box store catalog, even if it's on a super cheap sale. This doesn't look like it as much with my camera. This was supposed to be a pale apricot blush, and it is a neon peach. Just way over vibrant for this bed. I don't like the way it ages and fades. It does produce a ton of blooms continuously. Not a fan. I will be removing this, but probably not till the winter. This little coreopsis is going to get a cutback. I really love it as a late bloomer. Little petite blossoms, but it is kind of toward the end, so it's going to get a shearing here. Now you can see in this bed, it's ever evolving. I'm always pulling things out and adding things, and I'm never content with it. And there is a hole right here where I've tried to fill in many things. The problem is this plum tends to shade this area too much. At the beginning of the year, it's something that likes full sun, and then it can't be too tall because the plum will lean on it. I haven't found the perfect thing to fill this hole yet. So I'm still looking, I'm still patient, but I'm kind of thinking I might move this little hebe back here over, because it keeps getting buried by my rudbeckia. So that's a brief little look at the evening I have ahead of me, because it actually is almost dinner time. So I'm going to start this. I might not finish this project until tomorrow, but that's my starting point. My goal is to get this bed cleaned up, have it be a good ambassador for permaculture, help communicate to the neighborhood, hey, permaculture can be beautiful. You can have beautiful flowering things. You can have lush, abundant, productive, food-producing gardens that are also beautiful. And so I really want to get this shaped up, get it spiffed up, and looking how I envision it in my mind. Also, a quick note here at the same time, I love the fact that, look, you can hardly see our house. This is right up on the street. It's loud, it's busy, the city bus goes by. We do not have a big front yard at all, and yet I feel that my house is secluded and tucked back in. I feel like my house is tucked back in here, and as these trees get bigger, this cherry will get a little bit bigger, and as we get our greenhouse built, it really helps the house feel secluded. As you can hear from the delivery truck going by, the noise up on the street is quite loud, but once I'm on the other side of this berm here, it really is much quieter and much more peaceful. So I love the fact that my front yard bed not only can communicate to the neighborhood that permaculture can be beautiful, it not only produces food for my garden, it not only produces biomass for my garden, it also produces a noise break, which is super useful for me. All right, well, I'm starting to lose the light. I've been working out here for almost 2 hours and I still want to get my run in this evening. So I'm going to call it quits for today, but I'm probably 3/4 of the way done. So I got all of the daylilies removed. There is some benefit to working when the soil is very, very dry. Sometimes it can be kind of rock hard like cement and you can't dig anything up, but sometimes it's like dusty, and it's been so dry here for so long, it is that dusty quality. So it's actually quite easy for me to dig up all of the daylilies, and I also dug up 2 volunteer invasive walnuts while I was at it, and I have a black currant that I planted in the very front here when we first bought the house, and it did well for several years, but the last few summers have been so hot. Currants cannot handle that kind of heat, and it looks burned and sickly. And I also noticed that it had currant cane borer in it. So it got dug up and it's going to be composted. So all of those were removed. I pruned back a whole lot of things. I was able to prune back most of the large plum here. And there are a couple of large, like way in the middle, vertical water sprouts that I'm going to need my pole pruner for, and it is up at my dad's, so I'm going to have to go get it in order to get those, but it's mostly pruned and I'm pretty happy with it. All of the plum prunings are used for chop and drop. I don't have any extra wood chips right now, but in this dry weather they will turn brown very quickly. Just chop those up with my hand pruners and throw them back on the bed. Now this over here, now, this sad looking plum tree that I showed you at the beginning has gotten a huge haircut. We took the saw to it and left the healthy young sprouts, and they're going to be trained, and all of the large damaged and diseased branches were removed. It was pretty healthy in several spots, high above the graft, so I'm not worried that this tree can continue to do well. I think this really intense haircut is going to give it a second lease on life. So it's really important that when you prune your plums, you do it in dry weather, and we don't have any rain in the forecast for ages. So this is a good time to prune it and allow the tree to have time to put out new growth before it goes dormant in the winter. So if it's August or September where you are and you can carefully prune your plum tree, this one obviously easy to prune because there's no fruit on it. The fruit is ripe early in June, early in June. And so there's plenty of room to work without worrying about damaging fruit. The large Italian prune plum here, methylated prune plum, that's a different story. It's heavily laden with fruit. So there are some branches that I elected not to remove at this point in time, and I will remove them later once I have harvested all of the fruit. But I just took off all of those ginormous water sprouts and some of the damaged branches that had been looking a little bit sad, and I thought, well, maybe they'll hold on to their fruit, but there were some of them that the weight of the fruit itself caused the branches to crack, and then I noticed that the fruit was not continuing to mature. There was no longer sufficient nutrition going out to that part of that cracked branch, so a few of those branches got removed today as well. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to take a break, go get a big glass of water, and go for my run. So that's a good look at what it's like for me to spend a couple of hours working in the garden, trying to get this front bed rehabbed so that I can have it be a good spokesperson for permaculture and for having an unconventional yard, right? I want my yard to be beautiful if it's going to be unconventional. I want people to know that you can do sustainable, regenerative, food-producing gardening in your front yard, and it can be pretty at the same time. So that's what I'm striving for, striving to get this front yard looking back the way that I had originally planned it, overcoming the adversity of the drought that we're in and the heat waves we've been undergoing, and some amount of benign neglect because I've been really busy doing caretaking and work obligations. So trying to play a little catch up here, get this front bed spiffed back up so that it can communicate to the neighborhood, hey, check out this yard. You can do this in your yard. You don't have to grow a monoculture lawn. You can create a lush habitat for wildlife that produces a rich supply of organic produce for your family and also is beautiful to look at. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and tell your friends and let them know about this channel if they're interested in sustainable agriculture. And I also have a Patreon down in the description if that is of interest to you. I also have a brand new channel, Parko's Hausfrau, where I talk about ecological homemaking, and I do a lot of cooking and traditional domestic and craft activities that wrap into permaculture, that tie into permaculture and utilize things out of my garden here. So check that out if you have time. I'll be back soon, hopefully with more updates from my front yard of my permaculture food forest. Thanks.